You're listening to Write Right with the Story Perfect Editing team. Visit us at www.storyperfectediting.com for more information on developmental editing, copy editing, and proofreading services for your writing. Season 1, Episode 9. Hello and welcome back to the Write Right podcast. This is episode number 9, Judging a Book by Its Cover. I am Elon. I am an apprenticed editor at Story Perfect, and I'm currently starting Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger, which came to me highly recommended by about 1 billion people. And it's a short book and apparently brilliant, so I'm going to read it and see how I feel. On to you, John.
All right, I'm John. I'm the senior editor at Story Perfect, and I am excitedly starting a new craft fiction, nonfiction book that's called Making Shapely Fiction by Jerome Stern. This was actually Katie's recommendation. It sort of is a way to put your finger on why writing gets boring and how to make it better. So I'm hoping it's gonna teach me more about developmental editing.
I'm Katie. I'm copy editor, and I'm currently reading Phoebe and Her Unicorn. And I'm showing it to my peers here so they can see the cover art, which is why I picked it up, because look at it. It's freaking fabulous.
It's beautiful.
It's a middle grade graphic novel about a girl and her magical unicorn. And the unicorn is like super arrogant and kind of a jerk, and it's really funny. And I love it. Ian, what about you?
Hello, I'm Ian. I am an apprentice editor, and currently I am rereading the graphic novel Watchmen. It is my favorite
nice
superhero group, and I just love the artwork in that book. It's amazing. The movie was actually quite good, but
You're the first person I've heard say that about. I haven't read it, but I did see the movie, so I didn't know how to compare.
I am a really big fan of that universe, and yeah,
awesome. So we're here today to talk about book covers. There's a well-known adage that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover,
but you should.
But the reality is, what do you do when you go to a bookstore? When I go to a bookstore, I look at all these spines of books, and if I see a title that I find interesting, I pull the book out of the bookshelf and I look at its cover. And based on that, I will flip it over. If I look at the cover and I'm like, meh, I probably won't flip it over and read the back copy. And that's just because it's our natural, I think it's a very natural thing to do. And, in terms of book marketing, especially for self-pub authors, a book cover is really critical because people browse online bookstores much the same way. You see these thumbnails of a book cover with a book title and a rating, and that's all they go on. And so if your book cover is slapdash or cliched or whatever it is that might turn a reader off, then you might lose them. So we do judge books by covers, much to the chagrin of adage finger wagglers everywhere.
I did bring a couple examples because I am like the biggest, I won't even open a book. If I like the cover, I'm like, it's going to be good. I'll show them to you, but the readers will have to look them up.
For instance, Watchmen has a really distinct, good looking cover. It has a smiley face pin. Yeah, it has the blood, and it's awesome to look at.
Mm-hmm. It's good. So I picked this book. It's called The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and I'll show you guys the cover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. I've actually seen that before at a bookstore and thought that was gorgeous.
And the cover is like a black and white striped on the sides here, and the inside of it is circus striped as well.
Oh, wow.
It has like a circus theme. And when I saw it, I was just like, I don't know what this book is about, but it's so pretty. I need it. So, and then another book I bought just when I saw the spine of it is called Life with Mr. Dangerous, because it's got a rainbow striped spine. It's a graphic novel.
It's fabulous.
And especially, I think, for me, when there is some juxtaposition between the name of the book and the artwork, that says to me that I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a couple examples of some books I picked that people can go look at the covers and see how they feel.
I think, there's also an interesting thing that happens when I see people reading in public, and I think that e-reading has really also done a number on the kinds of books people read in public, because I remember before I came out as a huge nerd, I felt a lot of trepidation about reading a book with a dragon on the cover, or like a dude on a horse with a sword on the cover out in public. Like I wouldn't do it. When I saw my buddy, I was 11 years old, and I saw a buddy of mine reading Harry Potter, and I was like, that looks cool, but you're such a nerd. Because it had like some kind of crazy, I don't know, it was like a kid flying on a broom. What is this? I'm an adult. I read Moby Dick at 11. Thank you. I want my books to look like this. I'm holding up the cover of Franny and Zoe, which just says Franny and Zoe on a white background. And to be honest, it's an incredibly boring cover. But because it's ostensibly a classic, you can do that kind of garbage.
All the classics have super boring covers.
Yeah.
Can I just say that? They're just not like any of them have.
No, it's a real thing. But so I lost my train of thought, but the point is that e-readers have sort of like democratized this idea that you can read whatever you want now in public. People, I mean, the amount of, and I am a terrible person. I read over people's shoulders on public transportation.
I
I'm
do
gonna go ahead
that. I
and
do
say
that
it.
too.
I do it all the time because I love knowing what people are reading. And like
Someone
and the
was
most
reading Lord of the
unlikely
Rings.
people are reading the most unlikely books because they have e-readers. Like you'll see a smartly dressed young woman who's clearly like a marketing professional reading Patrick Rothfuss on her Kindle, and I'm like, yeah, the world is a beautiful place.
Well, and I think what that says is just how much the covers say about the book, right? It's like you can look at a cover and know right away if it's a fantasy novel or if it's sci-fi or if it's a classic, or like the art says so much more about it. And if you don't have to worry about people looking at the art, I mean, you could just read. I've read some questionable things on the bus. I'm like, I would
50
not
Shades
read
of Grey,
this.
Anybody?
Exactly. You can be like, you can read whatever books you want. No one's gonna know because they can't see the
Unless
cover.
they're reading over your shoulder.
Unless they're reading over
Like
your
me,
shoulder, Elon.
like jerks like me. But a cover can tell a lot about your book. Going back to the Harry Potter example, it very clearly indicates grade and reader age. And as the series becomes more YA focused, it carries that thread of sort of like whimsical middle and low grade novel until later it becomes a little more serious. Like the covers get a little bit darker, less adventure-y. They even stop featuring like a person on the cover later in the book. Like, right? Doesn't that Deathly Hallows not even have Harry on the cover? Or am I mistaken?
One thing I've noticed is that they've been reprinting the Harry Potter books with some covers that are actually like photorealistic. Like they'll have like a picture of like a train station, but it's actually like an actual train station instead of like colored full children's artwork.
Yeah, and you'll find very different styles of cover artwork for different markets.
Yeah.
So like Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series in the US has a very sort of traditional fantasy art cover featuring, like a woman who's the character Vin, like flying through the sky holding a knife. And then the UK covers are like these gorgeous kind of abstract blue mist thing happening. And it's very interesting to see how different markets will have different types of book covers. When
I was a kid, I didn't want to read a lot of fantasy books because the covers were so like boring to me. Like, I was like 10. So if there's like some shirtless guy on the cover, I'm just like, I don't care about this at all. But as soon as I saw Anne McCaffrey's Pern series and there was a dragon on the cover, I was like in. I was like, I am on board for this.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of those like Robert Jordan, those kinds of authors, their covers all fall into like a very similar category.
Yeah, it's a cliche trope-filled cover of like a guy with a sword fighting some kind of orc.
Right.
That's the covers of Lord of the Rings, the original covers that Tolkien drew, are gorgeous. The cover for The Hobbit is amazing. He painted it with watercolors, like it like really tells this whole story. There's an element of journey. There's the Lonely Mountain. There's a dragon in the sky, and you can see everything from complicated language to scale. It all sort of appears together. And so you can tell a lot to your readers in covers. For instance, I mean, you can have like Easter eggs and secrets that once a reader's initiated into the rights of your story and knows all the secrets, they can turn over the cover and say, "Oh my God, I know what that is."
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really cool feeling, I think, for me as a reader. I don't know how you guys feel about that kind of stuff, but I live for that.
No, I love
Yeah.
it. I've seen some that have like they have like tricks to them. Like they have like I saw one, and I'm not gonna remember the name of this book now because it's like been on the verge of me buying it because it's so pretty. It had like a transparent cover around the actual cover, but it looked different with the transparent cover over it than it did without. And I'm like, this is clearly telling me something. And I do like getting a message from the cover art. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the crux of the point, and we all agree, and I'm sure that listeners, you're like, yeah, totally. Books by covers. We judge them. But the crux of the argument is that a cover is very important. And John, what are you looking at there?
Oh, it's just a book based on the online MMO EVE Online, and
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
this cover is amazing.
Yeah, it's got a sweet spaceship, planets.
Yeah.
It's very beautiful.
Looking good.
One of the interesting things to see, actually, speaking of like really high quality sort of professional covers, I've seen a lot of books on Inkshares where the person designed their own cover, and I was very impressed with what they were able to do with their covers using their own resources, and then to see what those books turn into after having some kind of like professional service do it for you was really remarkable. For instance, I just got the arc of a book, and the cover is outstanding on this arc. It's an advanced reader's copy. It's not even the final release, and the cover is outstanding and speaks volumes about the quality of the book within. So I know that a lot of advanced reader copies will typically be, like bound maybe with just like an extra piece of paper that says the title of the book. But as a reviewer, getting a copy of a book like this one, for instance, I'm showing the group, is Dreams of Distant Shores that I mentioned last podcast. It's like a full-on cover. It is the finished quality book, and it says a lot about what might be in this book.
Yeah.
There's a pensive woman at an interesting window. It looks like the seasons are changing. It can say a lot about the content. And so you want the kind of thing that is really going to entice a reader into your story immediately.
I will say that there's one cover artist, and he has done like most of the books I think I have like ever read. And I didn't realize they were like all done by the same person, but he's the one who does the Watchmen covers. But he also did like the Michael Crichton, like all the Jurassic Park series, like that like infamous logo.
Familiar. Like,
yeah, his name
same
is
kind of style.
His name is Chip Kidd. And I mean, all of his work, it's really different, but like, I mean, he's just done so many books I've read. I thought it was like, clearly I'm drawn to an artist, like, and that's just a big part of why I've chosen a lot of books. He does some of like David Sedaris's covers, and like the genres are really wide, but his work speaks to the same. It still speaks to me no matter what genre the book is. So I think that just says a lot about the power of the artist who's doing the covers.
I mean, packaging matters so much, just as in all elements of being a consumer, including buying books. Packaging matters tremendously.
Exactly.
So
well,
I'm
and
glad that we're...
I will say, books. This was like a long time ago, before it was a thing. Books I bought for the cover art was the Twilight series. Okay, and I'm not afraid to admit that because the covers on those books are good. They're good covers.
Yeah, they're good. The subject matter, however.
Well,
I mean,
I read them and I was like, well, that was fun. I'm done now. And then
I read all of them. I read all of them. I'm not going to lie. Why would I lie to you?
Hey, you wouldn't, Elon.
I went through a pretty bad breakup, and I was stuck in my brother's house, and his wife was like, "Dog, read these books, homie." And I was like,
She was like, try
okay.
hard.
And so I read all of the Twilight series in a matter of like 2 weeks.
Yeah. That's what they're for. That is the perfect situation to read them.
And I was like, Edward, you're so molesty.
Yeah.
But
like the cover art on those is really dramatic. And
it is.
You're like, before I knew what they were about, I was just in it for the art. And then I looked at the book and I was like, vampire, whatever, I'll read this. Like, I like this cover art. Because that's just how I tend to approach books. And that says something like, as much as I was like, the books were fine for me. I like enjoyed reading them. I wasn't gonna like go reread them 100 times, but I was like, these are fine. This is like a weird romance. There are a lot of romances. They're molesty and weird, and no one really thinks about those issues. So I read them.
We can talk about that another podcast.
Yeah, we'll talk about sexism later. Okay.
Yeah.
We need a few episodes for that. But you know, I mean, I bought those for the cover art because it was good, and sometimes the cover art can be better than the book, but I think still for me they were like worth it on that front. And then when they release like movie cover books, that breaks my heart.
Yeah. Oh my God, the Lord of the Rings ones. Even though I would have a poster of Viggo Mortensen above my bed if Crystal was cool with it, I still don't want to see him on the cover of the Two Towers.
No, there's just something wrong about it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, because a movie is an interpretation, and that they could make another Lord of the Rings movie in 15 years and someone else's vision, but it's the same. Yeah. The story should see.
What it does is it. Sorry, I interrupted you, and I feel terrible about that.
We have glitches.
What it does is it puts it sort of like infects your mind with a vision for how characters are supposed to look, when in reality, a lot of the time, an author leaves enough of it up to you that you populate these characters you populate the cast with characters of your own making. And after watching a movie, it totally changes the way you read a book from time to time.
Honestly, I think if people are going to do like a book reproduction of like the movie, they should stick to the movie poster if it has no characters on it. Like if the novelization of 1982's Tron just has like the logo and that's it.
Yeah, that would be better. You were right. It's mostly when they put the actors on the cover, and I'm like, they don't belong here, even if I love them.
That actually brings up a pretty good point. When I was first debating doing cover design for a book that I was working on and trying to fund through Inkshares, I was told that like absolutely to not have characters on the cover. And I see that everywhere. Honestly, I see, like characters on the cover. Harry Potter, another great example. Like characters are always on the cover, but I think it's that idea of like photorealistic or actual real people that really is kind of bad. Although it works from time to time. I think that there's a lot of urban fantasy that does it. Like Grimdark does it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like I don't tend to be drawn to covers with people on them. I tend to, unless they're like really fake. Like I bought a book just because it had a mannequin on the cover, and I was like, "This looks weird," and it was weird, and it was great. Like,
unless the character is the thing that the fiction centers around, like what's on the cover should represent what the reader can expect. So if it's an urban fantasy with like a kick-ass heroine. I see a lot of that where they'll have like the woman on there, like she's got her hair flowing and like there's fire in the background and whatever, and that works because that's what readers want. Yeah. They see that, they're like, oh yeah, it's like another Kill Bill kind of, it's like whatever.
Absolutely. I think another really good example of books that require people on the cover are romance and erotica.
Yeah.
And the example that comes to mind, hilariously enough, is Chuck Tingle. Whose book covers are delightful because, like, for instance, I have to look up the title of this because I don't want to mess it up, because it's amazing. I'll distract you with the dulcet tones of my stuttering while I look this up. So Chuck Tingle, for those of you who don't know, writes erotica shorts on Amazon with titles like Helicopter Man Pounds Dinosaur Billionaire Butt.
It makes me tingle with
his book Space Raptor Butt Invasion is
what's on the cover.
So his book Space Raptor Butt Invasion is currently nominated for a Hugo Award.
No.
And there's a long and complicated story about that.
We'll get into that on a different episode.
But he's got a book, for instance, that's called he wrote a book called Feeling the Burn in My Butt, and on the cover is a man and a unicorn wearing Bernie Sanders style sunglasses. It's literally these books are the most
He's
amazing.
even got a Wikipedia page, so he's done well for himself.
No, Chuck Tingle is the real deal.
Wow.
I urge you all to check out his book covers because they're tremendous. There's a YouTube video I watched yesterday of a guy reading out loud this one, which is called "Slammed in the Butt" by my Hugo Award nomination. And
I'm
the
looking at that
cover
right now.
features.
Yeah.
You're looking at it, right? So, and everyone who's listening, please Google this. Google "Slammed in the Butt" by my Hugo Award nomination, and you'll understand why it's really important to have people on the cover because it says volumes about what the contents of the book are going to be. There's a hot man with a beard and a Hugo Award with a face. And that's what's
You
happening
can't
on
use
that book
hand
cover.
motions. You can't use hand motions, Elon, or they're not going
Oh
to
my
know.
god, it exists.
But it implies a lot about what's going to go on in that book. The Hugo Award is behind the man, and and the title is very clear about what's going to happen between the man. He has a book called Schrodinger's Butt. I'm telling you guys,
I'm dying.
Chuck Tingle. I just introduced you to a world of glory.
Wow. But
Well,
So-
and I will say that for erotica, I think a lot of times the audience and the characters are so specific, right? It's why you want people on the cover because they tend to be so like the audience tends to be whittled down to like such specific likes and dislikes.
Yeah, it's very niche.
Yeah. So like, yeah, if the guy the guy has a beard on the cover and you like bearded dudes, then Elon's gonna pick up that book.
Yeah,
You know? Like,
because that's what gets me off, and I'm reading erotica, and that's the point.
right,
exactly.
exactly. So I think that's like one of the reasons it's important. For other books, I would argue that the artwork should relate to the concept of the book more than the characters.
Yeah.
Because that's like what the book is about,
Mhm.
as opposed to
Or
like,
it should be stylized in a really creative
Yeah,
way. You know,
yeah.
like the Night Circus is a great example. Like
yeah.
the one that you showed earlier. It certainly features circus style things, but the book, as far as I'm aware from its synopsis, is actually pretty far out.
It's really far out, and it's like beautiful magic realism.
mhm.
Yeah, and I think like when you look at the cover, you feel like a little bit of magic. You're like something circusy and different, and then you read the book, and that feeling is maintained throughout the whole book. And I
Yeah.
think that like whatever the art inspires is what the book should inspire, and whether that's raptor butt invasions or like cool circus magic, it should-
Whatever it is that works for you.
whatever it is,
Or
that
if
you're
it's Dragon
looking
Riders
for
of
and
Pern,
speaking
like
to
if it's
you.
that,
Yeah, exactly.
it appeals to you. So let's sort of bring this thing home, and I'll let John introduce Story Perfect's new deal here, which is sort of the purpose of talking about book covers. It's all been a sales pitch. Thanks for sticking with us. Over to you,
all
John.
right, so we just got into doing book covers for authors.
Yeah, so hey listeners, this is Elon here in the editing room, and you might have noticed that John's mic started sounding kind of robotic. Something happened to his mic at the latter half of the recording session, so I'll do my best to summarize what he said during those sections where he sounds gross, for lack of a better term. The thing that he says here is that essentially we just got into doing book covers for authors because a lot of the time when we want to help at Story Perfect, we want to help authors who self-publish their books succeed. And one of the things that we hear, that John hears a lot of the times from them, is where can I get a good book cover? So he connected with a graphic designer who's been doing graphics for him, and then John asked him if he'd be interested in doing book covers for Story Perfect, and the venture started about a month ago, and they're already working on covers 6 through 10, and they'll have had 10 projects done fully within a month or so after starting, and some of those books are on Inkshares. He closed this little section by saying, you talk about judging a book by its cover, and it's especially true on Inkshares and platforms like it, where if you get a great cover up, even when it's an ebook, that's what people are making a decision on. And so what we're looking to do now is build up a portfolio. John encourages you all, and I encourage you as well, to go to our website. There's a page up currently for it, even if it's eventually going to be on its own URL. Right now, that's where you can see it. So head to storyperfectediting.com to see your cover options.
Yeah,
So
I
you
saw
heard
the
it-
covers. They look amazing.
They do. A number of the authors on Inkshares who've gotten covers from us have I've seen some of them because they've uploaded them to the group or whatever, and they look really good. In fact, when it's time for me to put my books back up, I'm going to be using this service because I want a dope book cover. That's what it is. Because like when I see my book printed, I want to look at it and be like, that's a dope book. That's my book that I made. It's really sweet. Yeah, I was pretty articulate there, but you get it.
Well, and the thing is, that's
Hey, listeners, it's Elon again, replacing John's robot voice. Here he says that it's actually pretty important. A lot of people want to do their own covers, but to have someone who is trained in graphic design, who's going to approach your book objectively, is going to make a really huge difference for you. He likens it to having an editor that isn't you, because you wrote the book, and you might not capture the right elements because you have certain ways of thinking about it that are obvious to you, but maybe not so obvious to a first-time listener.
Yeah, I mean, there are exceptions to every rule. I mean, obviously, if you're a really talented visual artist, go for it, make your own cover. But I know I'm not.
No.
I cannot draw at all. So I think that puts us just about at time. Please go ahead and go to the Story Perfect website, storyperfectediting.com, and check out the cover service before we move it over to a new URL. And continue judging books by their covers. Because it keeps people who we really like, visual artists, in business, and it makes a lot of sense to do so. So apologies to all adage finger wagglers about book covers and judging them, but what it seems we all think that's the way to go. Anyone have any final thoughts about book covers before we wrap up the podcast?
I mean, I would just say that we've been talking about judging the books by the cover because you do have to pick it, and that's just what it boils down to. That being said, if someone recommends me a book that maybe doesn't have stellar like cover art, I'm still going to give it a chance.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
You
Yes.
know, bad cover art has turned me away in the bookstore, but never from a recommendation.
That's usually how I find books. People recommend them to me, and I go, okay.
I think I've even qualified recommendations with the cover's kind of lame, but like deal with it.
Yeah.
Right. Like Asimov's covers are kind of so-so, but pretty good books. So, you know, I would just say that like it's really important, but for the writer, like make sure you have a finished book that you love before you worry about the cover art.
Yeah, cover after content.
I would add from my final words.
Hey there, me again. John's final words here were pretty straightforward, and they were a little bit different from ours. When you are an author ready to publish, you want to put a good cover up there as something that is as important as editing. And we know editing is critical because it can help tighten up your story and make it a more satisfying read. But the cover is huge because it's your first point of connection for people who don't know you at all and are just browsing a catalog or a bookstore or a digital bookstore to check out your work. And your cover is hopefully the thing that will tip them over the edge and turn them from a prospective reader into a reader. And so that's why John believes that cover is right up there with the other pieces of finalizing your book when you are ready to publish. And that, you know, a cheap Photoshop job won't attract people the way a professional cover would.
Yeah, I can't remember offhand, but I think there's a Twitter account that actually is called like Kindle Cover Disasters
Yeah.
or something like that, and it just sort of like curates covers that are not quite so good.
I can't
And
tell you how many like self-published Kindle books I've scrolled past because the cover art is really bad, like bad photoshopping and stuff. Like I'm just not gonna. I'm gonna assume that that's how much effort they put into all of it.
yeah,
And
that's exactly called judging the book by its cover. I think, Katie.
exactly. It exactly is.
Which
Good
is
for
what
me.
you should do, listener. Sorry about it. Anyway, so thank you so much, podcasters, for joining me. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. We'll be back in a few weeks talking about some more interesting book-related shenanigans. And until then, visit storyperfectediting.com for all of your editorial, book cover, and other needs. Thanks.